So
yeah, I think those two are additional layers which are developing with big data. And
so I think we know what are the compliance checklists that we need to follow when it comes to cloud computing. But I still have one question. For companies who are actually handling cross multi-jurisdiction, what about the jurisdictional pitfalls, and how do you handle it, and how do you update every time, with the new data protection law? For example, the recent Singapore and Malaysia data protection law that came into force in 2013. So, Sunita, I would like to hear from you. How do you, manage the jurisdictional pitfalls?
Okay, let me put it this way. I don't see very often that we get multi-jurisdiction contracts. Every company on this panel would like to see those. I think if you follow something as comprehensive as Cisco's following, then it just becomes easier to follow through. Generally, these are best practices, and these have come from a collection of, the red mark countries. The EU, for example, has the most comprehensive kind of data protection system and law and model contracts. If you follow that, if you follow the ISO policies, if you are ISO certified, for example, the ISO 27001, then to a large extent, you don't have to follow, the individual country legislations as closely, because most of them are also legislating based on the best practices that have been set under the safe harbor rules and under the EU data protection rules.
Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful idea, quite a strategic idea. Follow the country law which is most stringent and apply it to most of the
standards. The SOC trust principles, I think, the trust principles and best practices, the Security Organization Center. So, those, in addition to the ISO 27001 certification, it was mentioned in one of the previous, I think Indranil mentioned from the audience that if you're certified ISO 27001, you have sort of a waiver from prosecution or those kind of things. So certainly it helps for Indian service providers to be certified from an ISO 27001 perspective, to not sign multiple hundreds of pages of questionnaires when they want to get business because they're not the customer isn't comfortable of your security and data protection standards.
Right, or have to do multiple SAS 70 kind of audits for each customer and each data room in a center.
Okay, that seems really, I think, a good idea. But okay, I still have a doubt, So now I know how do I tackle the multi-jurisdiction law. But recently, Russia, for example, the Russian Data Protection Authority sent a notice saying that all data processed of Russian citizens should be done locally. Indeed, they have also removed Hong Kong and I think one more state from its list of data protection. Vipin, I think this question is to you on data localization. How does company react for such compliances, and how do we comply with it, when all the data needs to be localized?
Okay, so here's an example of somebody that wants all the benefits of cloud and yet wants to still keep control. Give away control, yet keep control. If I can use an example, how many of you own a car? I'm sure all of you own a car. Do you also use taxis? Okay, so let's pretend that you don't have a car. You decide from an economic point of view, it is cheaper, or renting a car, owning it, keeping it in your driveway, in front of your house, is very expensive. Okay, because it's just sitting there for many, many hours, not being used. You decide, I want to save some money. Okay, I want to use a taxi when I'm going to work, when I'm coming back. So you put a tender out, I'd like to get a taxi, you ask Ola, you ask Uber. But by the way, I want that taxi in front of my house all day long because I want to have control of it. I want it local. I want it in front of my house all day long, but I only want to pay for it when I go on my trip. Would you get the benefit? No, you wouldn't. You might say, okay, let me try something in between. I want a day car. I'm going to go somewhere for a shopping trip, and then go to a movie, then go out for dinner, and then come back. And I want that same taxi and the driver waiting all day long for me. But I only want to pay for when I'm in the car moving. You won't get that benefit. Okay? So in some cases, you want to have your own car because it is important to you that you have your own vehicle. And on the data side, there are some cases where you want to have localization, where the data is extremely sensitive, where it might have to do with the security, it might have to do with individuals' PI data or some other reasons. In other cases, you might want just a taxi, where it is information that is in the public already, where you don't really care, well, it's already in the public. You do not have any benefit keeping it in your own driveway, okay? So you have to look at what is the information that you're talking about, what is the purpose that you're using, and then decide, do you want to have your own car, or do you want to use a taxi and benefit from that?
Yeah, but Vipin, I still feel, is it not going to impact on the business? Suddenly a new law comes and says that all the data centers should be located in Russia. You cannot process the, like recently I was just checking with all my team, are we processing any data, of the Russian citizen? How does the company respond to such requests, and what impact does it bring?
So if I can use that same example, the taxi companies will provide that data to you, okay? They will provide that taxi service to you, but not at the same price, okay? I'm sure Hitachi, I'm sure Cisco, I'm sure the other cloud providers, if Russia or any country or any company says, we want this service and we want it localized, they'll say, yes, we think you're not being silly we think you're not being smart about it. We can provide that, but you will not get the benefit, and your costs will increase.
It'll be at a higher cost. So, that's a classic example. I think, frankly, a lot of these data residency and sovereignty laws are evolving, right? So, and as Vipin rightly alluded, I think the main concern of the governments is that their citizens' private information should not go outside the borders, right? That's a valid concern many governments can have and should have. I think you can get over that once you use services which allow you to have different controls for different sets of information. Right, so for information which is sensitive and private, you could keep it within your borders. You could have a data center, set up within your borders so that that information doesn't travel outside the country. But for information, for example, about networks and IT systems and policies and stuff like that, which isn't really private in nature, that could be stored outside. You have hybrid clouds. You have private and public clouds. Private clouds are essentially for this kind of objective where you can keep information which you consider, whether private or trade secret type of information which is commercially sensitive, within your firewall, and the other which isn't really that sensitive, and you want to get the benefit of Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, etc. Because the private cloud is frankly more expensive, right? Because you use dedicated people, dedicated servers, and the economies of scale just don't work out to make it more cost effective. So there are benefits one can accrue from using a hybrid cloud model, whether within within a country or across borders. That can be used, which are available today.
Okay.
The one other point is how flexible of a demand do you have? Okay, from a government point of view, it might be steady and uniform, but in private sector and even in some cases for government, the demand might just increase phenomenally on a certain day or for a certain event, maybe after an election or during an election or during a natural disaster or something like that. It just might skyrocket.
So it will definitely have an impact on the business, but we need to deal with it. Yeah, that I completely agree. But Anand, I think this question is to you, with the increased penalties, like now it's maximum of 100 million pounds or 2 to 5% of the turnover of the company.
Is that the latest? Because we get 1 million or 2%.
100, okay, so this is the latest. 100 million pounds, yeah. So,
1 million euros.
Yeah.
2 to 5%.
Euros.
I think we have a few extra zeros there.
Yeah, okay. So my question was, with this increased penalty, what about the contracting terms? What are the, hot topics, when it comes to contracting issues, contracting terms for outsourcing contract?
Sure. So again, practical advice, right? How do you do it? It's good to know a lot of theory as well. going back to that whole cost-benefit equation and that risk framework, right? Otherwise, your business guys won't even bring the lawyer for the next negotiation. The way you negotiate your terms would actually be very dependent on the level of confidence regarding your processes and policies inside, all right? The biggest, the elephant in the room here is a version of the emperor has no clothes. Every company will have one shiny privacy policy and nothing behind it. It's like you peek behind it and you see the whole thing is a facade. I'll tell you why also. In India, we're very good at putting laws at a governmental level and not enforcing it. And on a company level also, most laws in the compliance space, you can actually pass a policy, and it's a prohibitory policy. Prevention of sexual harassment, do not do A, B, C. You can draft a good law, you can do small steps of compliance, have that independent panelist, have a PSH committee, and you can enforce it and run along with it. Similarly for your fraud policy, you can just specify, don't do A, B, C, don't do, claim the travel and expense policy, and you can implement it. Privacy policy is a completely different beast, right? Why is it a completely different beast? And I've had many discussions with my good friend Rajesh over this. I've had the pleasure of working with him in a previous life. The beast here, and why it relates to the contracts, I'll come to it, is most companies, and you'll be surprised to know, have never done a data classification exercise. That means for the billions of dollars they generate, how that data comes from the customer environment, which server it's processed in India, how it's given back, no one knows. Your data retention requirements, is it 3 years, is it 5 years, is it 7 years? Because they've not done the data classification, no one knows. You're doing training, all right? But when the data breach occurs, what is your remediation plan? It's against smoke and mirrors, right? Because your root cause, you've not belled the cat. Right? And so you're going into negotiations. Most companies are going into negotiations knowing this, right? And ironically enough, most customers also know the game is up, which is why after cross-referencing European directive, FTC model clause, whatever, comes the sledgehammer. What is it? First is the layer of contractual protections. Second is the layer of indemnity provisions. And third is in the event, so indemnity in plain language is an insurance provision. Should anything go wrong, I will step 2 and do the loss and make customer whole again. And guess what? 3, we will exclude it from your cap on liability. So it's not just a regulatory risk, it's now your contractual risk, which has exposed the company to financial liability. So now how do you advise and how do you navigate these waters, right? There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, Do some bit of sample-based data classification. It's always the Pareto principle. Most companies, you'll see 20% of your customers are 80% of your revenue. At least for a few select accounts, put in those additional processes, put in those additional controls. So not only because there's more revenue on the table, your risk is also proportionately higher. But what does that mean? You can also invest in mitigating that risk. And consequently, if you have an aggressive customer across the table, you're also able to offer better terms. But if you're one of those companies, who have just one fancy privacy policy, chief privacy officer, who's also your company secretary, your legal officer, and your real estate signatory, we will hope you better be too small to be sued. But if you're representing a company larger than, say, $100 million, you're a right target, right? So these terms are no more pieces of paper. A lot of companies in India are very nicely incorporated. Ironically, US companies are incorporating elsewhere for precise liability reasons. For us, for the VC space to appear more ripe for private equity funds, are incorporating in the West. So if you have assets in the West, these are no more paper contractual terms. If you're above a sizable amount, your assets will have repercussions here. So do your homework. Keep in mind, it's not just a piece of paper. Have your processes in place or negotiate aggressively in the contractual terms.
Okay, so I got a clue, but my only question is, when it comes to unlimited liability, is the vendor always in the losing, side? Shivaram, what do you say? Because you handle a lot of outsourcing contracts.
Yeah, losing side.
Okay.
No. See, you should see where it is coming from, right? The laws are strict over there. The data exporter or the controller has a lot of obligations, and if he breaches anyone, he has a whole lot of penalty. And what is he doing now? He is making it more worse for the country people also by outsourcing it to a different country. So it becomes more stricter. Now, so it is only indemnification, limitation of liability usually beyond the limit which you put in the contract. Most of the time, privacy breaches goes beyond the limits which is put. You can mitigate it by a couple of things. One is clearly documenting your obligations, which everybody knows it. If it is EU, Appendix 2 will clearly say what are the additional ones you would need to be having. If it is American contract, customer contract will be there in the main MSA itself. So ensure that if you commit, you have to have processes for that. Now it's all people. It's employees. Whatever you say, as Anand said, it's very difficult. Even one person breaching will get the company into trouble. So training becomes very important for the project which handles personal data highly, as that Pareto rule is very important, because 20% of the companies will be handling very, very sensitive data, and the exposure is very high. If it's a bank, customer is a bank. Ensure that the policies, procedures are known to the employees working in that project, and implementation, enforcement. If you find one breach, take action. Please take action, and that will be also mentioned back to the team.
I think this is what Jogendra said in his compliance list, post-implementation audits.
Absolutely. And one more thing, actually, it is always good. See, when we work in we allow employees to work in our environment, it's much easy. You can all have the physical, logical separation, physical access restriction, taking things restriction. But imagine if he has to work on the customer environment. We have seen many problems. He would say that I would give internet to all the employees. It's for the discipline should be from those people. But there are people who don't have the discipline. They will download things, they will do things which would breach the agreement which you have committed. USB port. We don't give USB port, but the customer. So one thing you could do, actually, it is from experience, very early in the project itself, just convey these vulnerabilities to the customer, saying that it is an exposure for both the parties. Because you have given. So can you restrict all this? Very difficult. There have been one customer agreed, 10 customers have said it is a discipline you have to cultivate in your employees. So that's difficult. Then how do you mitigate? Cyber insurance. Actually, there are insurance, it's very, very expensive, which takes care of most of this. Even if it's a contractual commitment, and if you breach, even that gets paid by the insurer would pay to the insured. So that is one way of controlling. Actually, otherwise, contractually, we have always failed at the losing end.
Since we're talking on contractual obligation, I just want one question from Sunita. Sunita, what happens to data at the time of termination? When the agreement is terminated, how is it taken care?
Normally, the contract will contain very detailed clauses about what happens upon termination. So we just have to follow those steps. It will be that the client will either ask us to return the data or to delete the data and then to certify it. If you, again, I'm referring back to ISO 27001, if you are certified, then in most cases, the customer will accept a self-certification. Otherwise, the customer then wants to come across or send their auditors to do an audit. Practically, however, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, practically, however, now, even though it's a little bit more expensive option, most customers don't actually send the data or allow it to be stored locally. It is always stored at the customer site itself, on the cloud or in premises, and then the service provider gets a VPN access, and so the customer is fully in control of when they want to stop the access to the service provider or to a particular associate, even at an associate level. So to that extent, I don't think there is any issue. Deletion of data, I don't know how effective it is if it is lying in our premises, and there are a lot of CISO professionals here and they can tell us. But I think in most instances, the contract very clearly says what needs to be done.
I think keeping an archival copy is something that most outsourcing providers like to have the right to. And archival copies are really, really secure, right? So people in your organization, when the data is expunged, this will go back somewhere in this, Fort Knox, right? Where data will be very secure. And it's good to have that right, as long as the law of limitation doesn't run out, it's good to have that data, because tomorrow if you have a claim from a customer, you're not wanting to be in a position where you're looking at the customer's copy and don't have your own copy. right? So it's important. I think they work. Most companies have processes to destroy data and certify to customers. And if you don't have that, then I think that's a problem. So, that's...
So let me ask that question. If you don't have, and there is a data breach happened, so Vipin, how does the legal department react? Like, is the legal department prepared to deal with data breach obligation, especially in light of the huge penalty that has been coming in the new regulation?
I think that's a leading question, first of all. By the time it gets to the legal department, you've got a problem. So if there is a breach, I mean, usually the operations know about it first, the IT department knows about it second, the public relations or the CEO knows about it third, the sales guy knows about it fourth, and then probably the legal guy knows about it. Okay, the question is, how much time does that take? Are they doing anything publicly until it gets to the legal department? Do you have a plan as a company before it gets to the legal department? Because you cannot wait for somebody to make a decision and then allow them to move forward. You cannot also let any individual make their own decision that is not in agreement with everybody else. So I think the main thing is, as a team, you need to understand what your plan is. Be ready and be prepared to react. Recognize that India is very lucky so far. India has been very lucky. We've got Target, we've got Sony, we've got half a dozen other incidents in the US side, on the Europe side. We haven't had any real data breaches in India yet. And with this volume that we have, in the next 5 years, do you think we will or we will not have? I think chances are better that we will have a data breach here. And one or two companies will fail, depending on how they react. And it's, as managers, as leadership team, it's our responsibility to make sure that we have a good response, both publicly, internally, and for our shareholders, for our clients, for everybody. Legal guy's the last guy to react.
Yeah, Anand want to add something.
Just one point here on a practical note, right? There's a cultural difference between how Indian employees react and how a US employee reacts. I think we're so culturally ingrained to please the customer, and I've noticed this. The breach happens, the customer, 90% of the time it's a customer data loss prevention program that's picked it up. And what's the poor guy on the ground? I'm sorry. So what in legal terms? Admission of liability. What's the next thing? Overcommitment. I will remedy this immediately. They're sending somebody to go out. So this admission of liability, overcommitment and under-delivery, all of this is poor crisis management. So that cultural change should be there, So when you have it, you should, the way we do our training and all that. So just to give you an idea, Cognizant is $14 billion with 200,000 employees, right? So we're planning for multiple different contingencies, multiple different cultural factors. And sometimes it's okay to look in the mirror and admit it. Sometimes this might happen. And if it does, heads are not going to roll, all right? Give your employees that confidence to report upwards, have that risk remediation strategy, not the I will remediate, to send that email off and then, panic. So that cultural change, giving the employees the space to admit wrongdoing and having the right stakeholders in a rapid response team suits the customer and it keeps liability off the company's back.
I completely agree with you, Anand, because sometimes the employee does not realize that what they're doing is actually in breach of the contract, and sufficient training is really required to employees. So it's not that you just signed a contract and keep it under the drawer. You need to review it, have a post-implementation audit in place, and ensure that you also comply with the contractual terms. Joginder, do you want to add something before I just take up some?
Let's do Q&A.
Great. So yeah, anybody from audience? Yeah, please.
My name is Ram. I work with Infosys with the Data Privacy Office. Everything what discussed was right. So my only question is, why privacy by design is not inculcated in the employees in India? In privacy per se is not a very developed forte in India, in the companies in India. And employees still take privacy as a very what they call in Hindi like sab chalta hai attitude. So why can't we inculcate and stress more upon privacy by design so that even we have all these like contractual obligations and everything. By having this means, don't you think that it will strengthen the privacy of the end customers?
A question or a call to action? It is a call to action, really, right? It's a cultural, as Anand alluded to, right? An Indian employee will react very differently. Culturally, we are sort of attuned to not think about privacy breaches as something major happening in our lives. The way the privacy environment has been shaped in Europe particularly is because of the two world wars, right? What the governments did with the citizens, etc. So they're very sensitive about what they hold dear. In the US, it's not so grave because US is sort of very, similar culturally to maybe India, not in all aspects, but they are more open to sharing about themselves than maybe Europeans. But I think the issue is that, absolutely we must strike the right balance, right? I think the sab chalta hai attitude is towards one extreme. It's evident in the fact that we have so many potholes and no one cares to raise concerns unless someone dies, etc. So it is cultural, and I think the only way it will be an evolution. But I think as corporates, we all come from leading companies. It's our duty as well to sensitize not only our employees but also do certain activities in the community to raise awareness. Participate in forums where these things can be highlighted. Right?
If I can add to that, it is cultural, but then you have to keep in mind that each corporation also has its own subculture. Okay? And as a corporate, it's up to us to ensure that our culture is saying the right message. Okay? And our employees are coming from a different, open culture. We have to educate them and tell them, you're now coming through our doors, you have to treat yourself and what you're doing in a different manner. And that's part of the culture of that organization.
So a follow-up question to that is, can't we include all these things in the contractual obligations altogether?
Oh, then the contract agreement would be running 200 pages.
Contracts, really can't drive culture, right? It's the, tone at the top. I think what Shivaram mentioned about, you have a contractual commitment to set up certain information security management systems within your own premises when data comes here. What when employees go offshore at the client site, right? And I've had that incidence in my previous company. I used to work for an LPO called United Lex, right? Where we used to send people on site and the customers, we didn't allow people to carry phones onto the floor, right? But the customers, employees, they had free access to carry laptops, their own devices, etc. And our employees, we used to tell our employees that you shouldn't, but clients would say, why not? Our employees can, and you guys are sending your employees, so it's sort of discriminatory. So you get into the conversation that, it's at your risk, right? At the same time, you need to sensitize your employees that just because you're being given these freedoms on site, please don't abuse them, because even though we may not be contractually liable, I think the reputational risk that Anand alluded to is a very serious one.
Yeah, I just want to share one of my experience, and I think this is very common in industry. I was just reading in the news the other thing in IAPP report. Most of the employee thinks, like their life is an open book, especially the youngster, and everything they do, they just put it on the block, and if you question them, they just say, what's wrong in it, So I think, more important is the awareness among the employees, what is right, what is wrong, and what information you cannot put in. For example, I just said, under the European directives, even an email ID is considered as a personal data, whereas under the Singapore data protection law, it is not. So that is what the awareness program should have. Okay, any other question? Yes, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pinaki Ghosh. I am not in the field of the data security and this, but more on the IP field. Being the head of a couple of organizations starting in that, I feel that there is a gaps between the legal fraternity, then the persons who drive the data security or IP. Because when the contracts has been done, that contracts has been done without proper connection with the respective groups, first. The second is when the contract has been done, employees in that team, for that, they are not aware what is the contracts, what are written in the contracts. So instead of just blaming all the employees, because they are not aware. So
I
when the
completely-
culture has to be changed, culture can be changed if the context is there, if there is a group of people in that particular project, if you can tell them that what are the obligations has to be followed. At the same time, it is our job, at least I thought of that, because we should not curtail the innovation. If we say everything no, then there will be always people want to think in which way it should be yes. So we need to tell what is no, at the same time we need to tell what is yes. So then the culture has to be built up. Otherwise, it is most of the times I have seen it is 95 to 99% time, people or employees are not aware what is written in the contracts. So I don't know that how we can bridge that gap, but every time I tried, but I failed because of the
I think
not the different
anybody-
groups are integrated.
If you don't mind, I'll take that.
Yeah,
it's,
please.
it's funny that the IP professional in the room mentions this, right? Because data privacy, half the CSO folks thinks it rolls up into the chief security officer, half the general counsels think it rolls into the legal department. Similarly with intellectual property, does it go to the legal department? Does it stay with the business units? Are you recognizing innovation or you're patent stifling invention? But end of the day, I liked your point on subculture. I liked your points on processes, right? And I would challenge the gentleman from Infosys, right? While individually we may have a chalta hai attitude to our individual privacy, I think as professionals, most Indians are consummate professionals. And when we found the instances of data breach, it's not like, oh, I didn't care. They've gone the extra mile to help the customer. They've taken it to a Gmail account to continue working it at home. They have immediately shared a password to make sure time is not lost on their colleague's time point. So when we say these cultural nuances, individual privacy is not given a premium, but professional privacy in the workplace, I think Indians wear it as a badge of honor. It's a reflection of their professionalism. And I think the training programs also adequately cover it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that point as well.
Yeah, and I don't think so anybody is blaming the employees, but I think as rightly said by the eminent panelists, it's more upon, providing awareness program. As we said, like most of the employees, the youngster, they think that their life is an open book wherein they post everything on the net. I think it is more to do with the awareness program.
Now I'll just add this awareness program when you do, the awareness is more generic. But when a contract has been done and the people who are under these contracts are working on that, if they are aware of all the clauses on data security, IP, and so far in India, if it is aware, half of the 90% problem will be solved because people doesn't want to breach if they know.
I completely
I think the question really isn't about whether you hold privacy, and I agree with Anand, right? Most professionals will value client privacy, their data, etc., right? I think your question is more about execution. When you say people aren't aware, who's supposed to make them aware? So the negotiation team should do a handover, and most organizations of repute will have that process, right? To do a handover of knowledge from the negotiation stage to the execution stage, whether it's to the delivery team, from the services side, the InfoSec team.
My experience is telling even the delivery manager has not seen many times the agreement itself.
I think within your organization there are challenges.
It is many organizations. I'm not telling particular as I fully agree.
Okay, may I request
And within the same company you have different standards across different contracts as well. I agree, but it's really no one's fault other than the people who are managing.
since we are running short of time, I would say. Yeah, okay.
Thank you for the wonderful discussion. It was very interesting. But I have a question totally different. And the question is, so many times all of you mentioned about due diligence being done, ISO, standards being followed and done. But one thing which baffles me is that the place where ISO standards get defined and drafted is in ISO subcommittees, and the participation from those red countries is extremely high. And from India, we are pushing hard to see that it at least becomes a dot around. Why do you think that happens? And for your information, that's another part of it. But all the things which you are discussing, even 27001, when it got revised, there was participation from almost everywhere, but not from here, and which is very recent. And they are revising the other ones, including the cloud ones, the other ones, to get the recent things in place. And the meeting, the next meeting is happening in Jaipur, in India. So my challenge to all of you are, how many of us would be participating in that and sit around the table for, mark our presence around it? And why don't we participate?
Anybody?
I don't have an answer. I didn't know that, and frankly, I
Yeah.
think it's for the chief information security officers to put their, views on the table and go aggressive and,
Yeah, it's almost double digit from all these countries.
No, there is a simple answer actually. We're behind the curve in many things. It's also a factor of our evolutionary growth as a country, right? So everything is reactive. We wait for the standards to be set, and then we're scrambling to comply with it. And just when we've got the head around the scramble to comply, there's a new legislation come. Forget these certifications. The WTO GATT is going to become obsolete. We're nowhere in the TPP space in that as well. So it goes back to certain issues, and this is a challenge for the entire IT industry, right? We'll end it with this one point. Each employee of TCS, Cognizant, whatever, we generate around $40,000 per employee, $40,000 to $80,000. An Apple or a Google generates $400,000 to $600,000, right? So we need to stop following and processing other people's work, start innovating and setting standards and innovation from our country, and that will change the dynamic.
Okay. Over to you now.
In fact, you echoed my point. I wanted to make this point that instead of being the follower, which is our mindset, let's become now leaders of the next century.
Just one point. Yeah. Our Information Technology Act 2008, if it is properly understood, has everything what you have said in the standard. So we need not look for another standard. ITA 2008 compliance framework, if you develop, that will satisfy all these requirements and also protect the companies from legal liabilities arising in India, which is what we have to worry about. So I think companies are more worried about ISO 27001, Patriot Act compliance. None of them are worried about ITA 2008 compliance. So I would like CISOs to look at that point and ask people like us, what is there in ITA 2000? It is not just 3 years imprisonment, 5 years imprisonment. If you want to avoid 3 years imprisonment, what have to do? That is what becomes compliance.
Mr. Navi, on a lighter note, I'll end this. In case the IT Act was to be made so simple, then the lawyer fraternity will be up in arms. Where will they go? Poor people, having done all the 5-year courses and all.
Yeah.
So possibly the government has something behind it that you leave certain things to be deliberated upon. Anyhow, on that lighter note, many thanks to this wonderful interaction that we had. And Kavita, I think you really took the lead of getting the team through. And thank you all.
Thanks to my panelists.
Anand, Yoginder, Shivram, Sunita, and Vipin. Vipin, good to see you back. Thanks. And just to do the honors, may I request Dr. Pinaki. Incidentally, Pinaki and me are on the advisory panel of INBA, so he handles the IP. Thank you. Round of applause, please. I know the evening is setting in, but rest assured, sabr ka phal meetha hai. And a last photo session, please, before we leave. Yeah. Kavita, please.
I have a very difficult task ahead of me because one of the most difficult things you can do is stand between dinner or lunch and also try to live up to an expectation of having a 15-minute or 10-minute window, right? So I won't take too much time. I promise to scare the heebie-jeebies out of you, yeah, because I've been in the field of information security when people used to think that security means physical security guards and dogs. So I've gone to meetings and presentations where I tell people I'm a security consultant. They ask me, how many dogs do you have? How many guards do you have? Right? From then to now, when you say security, people understand a little bit more. My name is Raghu. I represent ISACA. ISACA, as I think I see some familiar faces here who I've seen in ISACA meetings as well. So I assume that they know what ISACA is. I am on the international board of ISACA. I'm also the president of the Bangalore chapter of ISACA. We have 1,500 members here in Bangalore. I'm very grateful to the organizers for giving us this opportunity to quickly talk about a very important topic today, which is cybersecurity, right? Cybersecurity is there everywhere. I almost had a privacy breach now. I might have had to erase your memories because the memory stick that I put in there actually had something that I'm not supposed to show out in public. So anybody who saw that, please come and meet me afterwards during dinner and I'll erase your memories, right? Okay, so quickly about us. We are an organization with 140,000 professionals globally. We have members in 180 countries. We have chapters in 200 countries. We are offering, or we always have offered, the certifications that are at the bottom. I know some of the people in this room hold the certifications like CISA, CISM. One of the newest offerings that ISACA has today is something relating to cybersecurity. It's called the CSX Nexus, Cybersecurity Nexus, because we believe that we need to make sure that professionals are able to stay ahead of the curve. I just came in as the previous discussion was going on, and there were a lot of interesting points on what do we do if something goes wrong, right? We do a lot of things. All the people in this room must be part of organizations, must be part of teams, must be part of programs, where one of the things you do is to make sure that something doesn't go wrong, right? The cybersecurity threat actually doesn't occur. But then if something happens, what do? ISACA is trying to provide an answer through the cybersecurity nexus. The scary part comes here, right? 82% of the enterprises expect a cybersecurity incident in 2015. This was a global survey that was done. I can provide more data if anybody is interested. More than 35% of the organizations who were part of this survey felt that they do not have the right kind of people to fill open cybersecurity positions, right? So I know there is a hole. I know that something can go wrong, but I really don't know how or who or when can somebody come and fix that issue, right? That's one of the things we came up with the survey. 69% felt that before I employ somebody to fill a cybersecurity position, I would like to make sure that he has some kind of certificate. So I was having a conversation with somebody who was telling me, do you think it's good to drive without a license? Or do you think it's better that you're a bad driver, good driver, but you don't have a license, right? So very difficult conversation when I was trying to explain cybersecurity to him, but the numbers speak for themselves. 46% of organizations felt that some kind of technical skill is required, right? Cybersecurity being what it is today, it's constantly evolving. You don't know from where the next threat is going to come. I download an app and I found out that my phone is not working anymore. I get an SMS from somebody saying that, please pay us so much money and we will make sure that your cell phone starts working again, right? So you don't know where the threat is coming from, so technology is very important. And the most interesting thing, at least from an Indian perspective, is that globally and within India, they believe that there are almost 1 million unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs, right? So there's a huge open job market for this, a lot of opportunities for us to become somebody else's cyber policeman. Another interesting piece of information is that there are a lot of threats today, right? 3 trillion is the global impact of cybercrime. Every year in February, I attend a conference in Goa where we have speakers who come from some of the Russian and Balkan states, where they actually come with masks and talk about things they do, including, for example, telling us that if you give me $1 per credit card information, I can find out whatever you want. You tell me the demographic, you tell me the country or the state, I can actually try and get you the information you want. It costs you $1 a record kind of thing, right? So the overall global impact of that is $3 trillion US. Last year alone, 2.5 billion records were exposed because of different kinds of data breaches, right? So if something goes wrong, the next thing you know is that there can be a breach. The implication on organizations can be tremendous. It's not just fines being paid. It can be a lot of other repercussions as well. Your reputation takes a hit. Your operations can take a hit. A lot of things can go wrong. The interesting side of it is that we don't have enough professionals today, right? People who can actually come in and tell you that this is what you need to do to make sure something doesn't go wrong in the cybersecurity perspective. People who can actually tell you that this is what you need to do to make sure that your worst fears, that call at midnight which you don't want, doesn't actually come to you, saying that, sir, we lost a few million records and this is what is going to happen to us, right? So ISACA has come up with a lot of surveys, a lot of data which talk about the same thing. For example, there was another interesting piece of information. 83% of organizations view cybersecurity attacks as the top 3 threats to business now, right? So APT and all those things have taken a stand Now it's coming down to something that, okay, we know that something is going to happen, and we are very sure that we are going to get affected by something in the next year. The interesting side of the story is what is there at the bottom. Only 38% of the organizations feel that they are prepared, right? It's a very scary number. So the rest of the organizations really don't know what they're doing and how they can work against something like this. So ISACA and a lot of other organizations have been working on something called the CSX roadmap. CSX stands for Cyber Security Nexus. A lot of resources are available online. We believe that a combined approach towards certification and providing necessary resources to organizations and individuals globally is actually going to be the way forward. The intention is to provide all kinds of resources, for example, credentialing and training. So you want to go and hire somebody who can actually help you fix a cybersecurity issue. What do you look for? You look for whether he holds a cybersecurity certification that ISACA offers probably. That could be one of the things that you do. A lot of educations and conferences, right? The more and more we have conferences like this, the easier it becomes for us to understand what's happening down the road and make sure that we stay ahead of the curve. Of course, membership and resources. There is a threat management resource center that is available on the website. I will talk about it in a minute. Which offers you all kinds of information on threats that are available. Make sure that you can stay ahead of the curve, keep abreast of it without actually incurring any kind of financial impact. You can just sign up and you get updates on threats that are going on, right? And as professionals, it also allows us to manage our careers. The cybersecurity roadmap that is being perceived is something like this. Everybody looks at a cybersecurity practitioner, somebody who can fix your issues as they go along, and then go up towards a specialization which talks about different things. For example, how do you actually know that a breach is happening, right? Do you wait for your customer to call you and tell you that looks like, why is my data being sold on the internet somewhere? Is that the way you find out of the breach, or do your own people have the capability to find out that there is a breach? That is the CSX identify. Then somebody who is able to detect it. Does it actually mean that data has gone out? Are we going to have issues? What do we do about it? Then how do we make sure that we are taking proactive stands on protecting the information, right? In spite of all these things, if something goes wrong, how do we respond? That is the CSX specialization relating to respond. And most important is how do we recover and make sure that we get back to business as usual as quickly as possible. These are the specializations that are coming up. Some of these are already available. You can look at the bottom link here, CSX-certifications. Some of these are already available. A lot of the importance of this is in the fact that this is not just a certificate. Many of these or all of these actually involve hands-on technical testing. That means that they expect the person who wants to be certified as, let's say, a CSX respond to actually work in a live environment where actually incidents are introduced and they look forward to how the person is going to react to that, right? So they want to make sure that it is very hands-on and actually the person who holds the certificate or the credential can actually add value to an organization. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. The practitioner's entry level, it demonstrates ability to serve as a first responder. If something goes wrong in your cybersecurity space, this is the person that you will invite to come and do something initially. Then you will have different specializations, which are the 5 that I spoke about. If you need to recover, this is what you do. You need to respond, this is what you do. And finally, somebody at an expert level, somebody a little higher up the organization who actually understands what's going on. And of course, which all gets married back to the CISM certification that has always been offered by ISACA. October 19th to 21st, we have one of the first global cybersecurity conferences in the world. It's being held in Washington, D.C. We are expecting more than 2,000 to 2,500 professionals to attend this globally. There's a lot of importance being given both by the government of the United States and the Department of Defense on cybersecurity. So this is going to be one of the biggest conferences that are being held. As I was telling you, a lot of other elements are also being introduced. For example, we have guidelines on how can small and medium enterprises look at cybersecurity, right? What do they need to do, right? How do you look at computer forensics, for example? If something goes wrong, what do you look for? At an initial level, what can you do before you call in the experts? All these, the threats and opportunities tool is very interesting. Go down to isaka.org/cyber and you will actually see the threat and opportunities tool. It talks about what kind of threats are evolving and what you can do as an organization. It's a very interesting resource and I would recommend that all of you go look at it because it gives you all kinds of very valuable inputs into what cybersecurity threats are coming up. That's pretty much what I had. Thank you very much.
You made my task easy.
Thank you.
No need for times up.
Thank you. Thank you.
So finally we are coming to the end of the program, and we'll have the last session where we do a wrap up. And since we are already at 7:20, I'm mindful of the fact that my military precision tells me 7:45 we close. So 25 minutes, 20 minutes for the last valedictory and 5 minutes for me to wrap up with a vote of thanks. Is that okay? And then we straight away head for drinks. So having said that, oh, everybody will like me post 7:45. I can rest. You. Having said that, without much delay, may I call on stage, please, Vipin. Please. You guys must be more enthused. 25 minutes to go. May I also invite on stage Rajesh and Kavita and Mr. Kaviraj. So I'd like you to just give a kind of an overall roundup of the scenario. Yeah, and then you can. Yeah.
We will not stand in your way.
Okay, please.
I don't want to stand in your way.
Can I just close this?
Yeah, by all means.
All right. Sorry. First of all, I'd like to express a vote of thanks to IAPP for doing this, for the INBA for doing this. And I can see from the number of people, I mean, our expectations were greatly met, greatly exceeded, because we were thinking it would be a small audience that would be interested in this very dry topic. And that's why we booked this size room. And in fact, we got what, double what we were expecting? So that encourages us to do more of these events. We're glad that you're listening. We're glad you're participating. And it shows the demand for that this type of topic, talking about privacy, talking about data protection, is coming of age now. This type of conference could not have happened even 5 years ago, the number of attendees. It shows that we have a very strong IT sector. It's growing stronger and stronger. And I can see how it's moving, how it's evolving from the back office, where we were just getting the work because of labor arbitrage, because we were a few rupees cheaper than somebody doing it sitting in the US or somebody sitting in Europe, to now where we're collecting huge volumes of data, big data, and doing data analysis and moving up the value food chain. Okay? That's a very big change. But it also is, we're also benefiting because technology has moved. Technology is moving very, very fast. And governments are trying to keep up. Governments are trying to change the laws so that they can keep up. They're always one step behind. You saw what happened in the newspapers yesterday and the day before, how they try to catch up and then get pushed back because technology has already surpassed them. Okay. And we have to recognize that this creates a lot of conflict. It creates a lot of conflict in cross-border data flows. A lot of you guys see that every day. Cybersecurity, a previous presenter talked about that. The trade rules that we have between how is information traded, how is tax collected on that information and on that value add. And also, very importantly for you and I on a personal level and on a corporate level, access to information. And I want to just take a minute to talk about access to information. Information and how it's stored is changing. Okay? 5 years ago, let's not take 5, 20 years ago, we might have had information stored in a form of paper. We might have written a letter and mailed it to somebody. 10 years ago, it might have been as an email that was sent to somebody. Okay? Now, governments are looking at, should we be treating them differently? Okay? Normally, if you send a piece of paper, and if I take this piece of paper and I put it in my vault in this hotel, if I give it to the hotel and put it in their vault, okay, can the police go and ask the hotel proprietor to open that vault and get out this piece of paper and give it to them without a warrant? Most likely not. Okay? However, if you send that as an email to somebody, or just even type that up and send it to yourself and just store it, sometimes the government thinks, because it's a virtual email, that they have the right to go in, ask the owner of that email to go in and get that information. Is that correct or not? So, because then they would argue, who's the owner? You have a Gmail account, you have a Hotmail account, you might have a Yahoo account, some other account. Is that, who's the owner of that account? Vipin Agarwal at hotmail.com. Am I the owner? Or is whoever owns Hotmail, Microsoft, are they the owner? Okay, think about it. How many people think it's Vipin Agarwal is the owner because it's my account? How many people think it's Microsoft because it's a Hotmail account? Or if it's a Gmail account? Okay, come on, raise your hand up. Be bold. So that's a debate that's happening right now, okay? I don't have the answer, but I want to leave you, and I know we're running out of time, and I know we've got a very strong person here on the side. So I'm just going to leave you with this question. If I would have taken that letter, folded it up, put it in an envelope, and put it in the post office, okay? In the post office mailbox. Now, and then can the government go to the post office, Indian post office, without a warrant and say, we want you to open up that letter that Vipin sent and show it to us and give it to us? What would the post office, what would everybody, every citizen here say? No way. That's a breach of privacy. You are just the conduit. You are just the mailman. Okay? You may own the physical letter, but you do not own the contents. You may own the email label and provide that service, but you do not own the contents. So think about it. My last remarks to you is we need to ensure that all data is treated equally in all forms, whether it's the old form of bricks and mortars or letters and pens and paper or virtual emails. Thank you.
Good evening again. I think it's high time for the dinner, but 4.5 hours. I'm really thankful for all the panel speakers, for all the participants who are interested. There were a lot of questions also. There was certain interesting questions as well. One regarding the awareness. Dr. Pinaki was trying to make it. So, and I had a small point which I just wanted to highlight it here, because this is something which I use it generally in most of my training sessions that I do for onboarding people. So what generally I ask them is, there's a lot of set of documents that people try to sign because as part of their onboarding formalities. So fine, I mean, they spend too much of time on that. And the next day when the session comes, so I just go and ask them the first question. So was all the documents signed and been submitted? Everybody raises their hands. Look, you won't believe that it's one big hall that will comprise of 150 people, and it happens every Tuesday. Okay, and every Tuesday I go, I ask them the same question, and they say, yes, we have signed all the documents, everything is done, onboarding format is complete. Then comes the simple question. Did you read the 4-page privacy policy document? How many people raise their hands? I've been part of the organization. I've been seeing it, taking sessions for the past 8 months every Tuesday, and that means total 32 sessions. I've not even seen one saying that I have read it. Not even one. Till date, I have not got that record. I would say organizations as a duty might be due to Section 72A, which says that there's a negligence. Negligence would result in certain criminal penalties, or there could be a civil penalty under 43A. It's fact agreed. But what would you expect from a person or an individual who doesn't respect their own privacy or their private information to bother about other people's personal data? This is the basic question. And this all grounds around to the other panel members. They were talking about culture. You can't go and ask an US guy, what's your favorite baseball league? Or a US guy or a European guy, you can't ask what is your favorite football team. You ask them, the question or response that you may get is, that's none of your business. But here that's not the case. So it's a whole about the culture. And accepting privacy as part, see, unless or until each individual understands the importance of privacy and they start questioning, there would not be any issues like 66A, neither issues like Aadhaar card, neither issues about anything about their personal information that has been misused. So it is that not just the government regulatory authorities, not just the corporates, not even the data brokers, individuals, it is their data. Would they let somebody use their property, even their mobile phone? No. And how do they let their personal information be used? So this is the whole concept, the culture. And IAPP as an association at an international platform, which we are trying as part of the Bangalore chapter. I'm thankful to Kavita, as well as another colleague. His name is Rajesh Vilakat. He's from Fox and Mandal. Unfortunately, he's not been able to be here. But as chairs, we try to do that, because being part of the privacy community, try to educate. And these are also some of the platforms where we can get that education or create sort of awareness. And privacy being a niche area, it's always caught between security and legal. And that's always the tussle that happens. And and nobody succeeds at the end of the day, because that's getting compromised in the name of something called standards like ISO 27001, which organizations are developing it based on their risk appetite. We find people executing contracts with the vendor. The first question is, are you ISO 27001? Yes, then forget about it. They don't even get to the extent that this vendor, is he capable to be treated to a service provider who has a higher standard of risk, which the organizational risk appetite is different between two parties. So this is some of the major concerns on the way in which culture that we try to adopt across different platforms, maybe an individual at a corporate level. So it's an individual perception of awareness. So IAPP, it started in 2000, has 25,000 professionals, and in Bangalore we were the first chapter in whole of India to establish, and we try to spread by conducting some sort of knowledge meetings every once in 4 months. And I would see the participations also. Participations are very lesser, because sometimes, most of the times, the certifications are done only for the career improvement. It's not just for the individual perception also. Okay, so based on all those things, I would like to thank INBA for giving this opportunity to have a big summit, and to Mr. Ramji, thanks a lot for all your support. I've been 2 months. He's not from Bangalore, but he's from Delhi, and everyday night calls pestering him, getting things done. Mr. Kavira Ji, as Archana, and also give a special thanks to Kavita and to all the other panel members who have made this successful. And thank you very much for being on this day. Have a nice day.
A lot, because my colleague Rajesh has already covered. I think we never imagined that we would be able to organize such a huge conference. When we started off, we had only in mind 50 members, and I think it's really good to see a huge turnover. I'm really thankful for our eminent speakers who had come here and shared their knowledge and their experience, the model that they adopt in their company. It's been really useful for all of us to gain those knowledge, and I'm also really thankful again, not the least, to our definitely organizer. I need to compliment them for making this conference huge. I'm really thankful to Mr. Ramaswamy, Mr. Kaviraj, and definitely Mr. Gary Singh, who is unable to make it up for this conference since he's providing some training in RBI. But we really miss him because these are the three musketeers who started this conference and who really made it happen. I'm also thankful to our sponsors, Lexplosion, LexisNexis, who really helped us when we really got a good response from people, wherein all the delegates who were really wanting to be a part of this conference. Thanks everyone for being here and for encouraging every one of us. Thank you. Yeah, I think, yes.
All good things need to come to a close, including this seminar. As rightly pointed out with everybody, overwhelming response. We are really humbled, and we promise to take this to the next level in the coming years. Having said that, allow me the process of completing the formality of a vote of thanks. A big vote of thanks to IAPP, to INBA, to our distinguished speakers, to our supporting partners, ISACA, LexisNexis, Lexplosion, Iris Consulting, Witness, and yours truly, Medha Advisors. And I will also like to personally call on stage the people who have worked ceaselessly tirelessly behind the scenes. So I'm going to take their names, and please give them a huge round of applause, because they are none others but the students, the next generation. I'm going to call their names: Ashita Jain, Akansha Talwar, Ananya Gupta, Bhamini Nagaraju, Gautam Jaiswal, Shan Jha, and our own Archana. And I think it's in the fitness of things that the bouquet should be presented to them. I hope you all agree. Kavita, do the honors, please. Everybody. Yeah, we'll have a group photograph thereafter, but please do the honors. And thank you once again. You people did a marvelous job of working behind the scenes and ensuring. Let me share with you in the